Hello, and welcome to another story narration video. I enjoyed doing the first one, so I figured why not do it again. Problem is finding good stories to narrate, but I have set up an email account, cubictales@gmail.com. So if you do have any suggestions or submissions that you do have the rights to, or just accounts of your own, feel free to send them on over. This is a submission from Sam, the Saints of Anarchy, and I'm gonna read it, and you're gonna listen to it, hopefully, and best case scenario, we'll both enjoy it. So let's do those things. The story I'm sending is a true account of all unexplainable, creepy events that took place while I was living at home with my parents. 19 years of it. My parents' house is haunted, and this is how I know. My parents' house, and my childhood home for 19 years, is very much haunted. Not the cheesy horror movie Haunted, where the cupboards swing open and shut and ghosts appear in the mirrors, but heart-racing, unexplainable terrors that will live with me for the rest of my life, to the point where I'm getting chills down my spine just writing this. I don't remember much from my early childhood, or moving the house from a trailer park in town out to the farm I called home. When I was 3, we moved, which was when the stories my mom fondly tells started. Her favorite, Sam and the Possibly Paranormal, story is about all the times I would be alone in my room, staring at walls, the ceiling, anything, and be chatting away to someone. Whenever she would ask me who I was talking to, I'd shrug, smile, and tell her I was talking to Baba, my great-grandmother who passed away when I was a baby. She would usually end the story off with a joke about how weird I was and make a jab at the fact that my best friends at that age were my hands. And yes, they had voices I gave them, and names. The only memory I'm able to recall from years 5 through 7 was waking up in the middle of the night. I was covered in sweat and bawling my eyes out because it felt like someone was grabbing my legs under the covers, and I couldn't get them to stop. I screamed for my mom, who came in the room, calmed me down, and told me if this is what happens when I fall asleep watching Phantom of the Opera, then I won't be watching it before bed ever again. I fought her on this, telling her it had nothing to do with the movie, and that someone was grabbing me. I felt it. It was too real to be a nightmare. Also, yes, my favorite movie growing up was Phantom of the Opera. After those two memories, I guess things were quiet until I was 13, 14. I was a teenager and had all the attitude to prove it, and like most teenagers, I thought I knew better than both my parents on most things, starting with how I wanted to decorate my room. Posters and drawings lining the walls, Christmas lights up year-round, blackout curtains up because who honestly needs sun? With this transformation, I decided that the cross hanging above my door had to go. It threw the whole aesthetic off, and I didn't see why my mom insisted that every room needs one above the door. So, with a typical teenage girl eye roll, I took it down. When my mom came and asked why it was off the wall, I told her I didn't want it, that it wasn't real. I was convinced that she was taking the show A Haunting far too serious, and that something on a wall could never save me. About a month after, I took it down, halfway through our summer break. Something to note about my old room before I dive back into the spooks. My dad had installed pine wood along the east wall, and a wooden door to cover our fuse box. At the time, the foot of my bed was facing this wall, so when I woke up, that's the first thing I saw. I remember this morning clearly, to the point where the fuse box door still gives me the creeps. I woke up to gentle wind on my face from the window above my bed. I lived for that feeling in the morning. I rolled into a sitting position and screamed at the top of my lungs because there was a black figure directly in front of the fuse box. Shaped like a man but resembling a shadow. Just a black man-shaped figure that was gone by the time my parents came running in thinking I was dying. This figure was the scariest by far. He seemed to have went away for a while after our first encounter. I'd call it a he. I always got the vibes that it was a dangerous male figure. Somehow that's the description that suited it most. I went a few months with no creepy sightings, until a night when we had family over. Everyone was visiting in the living room when I went to go play games in my room. I was 14 at the time, antisocial, and had a game I was determined to finish online. Some weird platformer with puzzles, but I was hooked. Headphones in and all my attention on this game, I hadn't realized my mom came in to say goodnight. She was dressed in her white flannel Winnie the Pooh onesie she always wore when it was cold. I pulled out a headphone when I noticed her leaning over my legs behind my laptop and asked what was up. Then she disappeared into thin air. This white figure that I thought was my mom, in her onesie, was gone. Laptop shoved off my lap, bedside lamp clicked on, and my heart was pounding out of my chest. Needless to say, I went to the living room to hang out with the family for the rest of the night. And yes, my mom was there the entire time. No, she wasn't in her Winnie the Pooh onesie either. I was never scared of the white figure. Maybe it was because I associated it with my mom? Or because it seemed to care? Like a parent tucking their child in at night and reminding them not to stay up too late. I found peace knowing this figure was around. Again, one encounter followed by a rest. A year or so went by and I was home alone. Parents in the city 4 hours away for a concert, due to return home the next afternoon, and my brother at his friend's house for the night. At 15, I was pumped. Mom got me some extra snacks, and it was on a weekend, so nobody told me I had to go to bed early. I took full advantage of the living room to watch shows on the big screen TV my parents had, and drew all night long. It was midnight exactly when the kitchen light and the living room light both went off, in sync, when I was nowhere near the switches. They aren't on the same fuse, and I was able to turn them on right after. I wish so desperately that it was a power outage, the flicker of power that could explain this. But the TV was still on, the satellite was still on. It was only the two lights that shut off. I went to bed after this. I was terrified. This started the beginning of what I know as the end. A couple of weeks later, I went to the kitchen for a snack. Headphones in, probably playing My Chemical Romance or Motley Crue at a louder than healthy volume. I was just about at my fridge when I suddenly couldn't breathe or move. It felt like someone had five-starred me in the middle of my back, between the shoulder blades. This lasted for close to a minute, standing in my kitchen trying to figure out what was happening. Once this passed, it was like nothing just happened. Not out of breath, no soreness in my back, nothing besides absolute terror. For those of you who don't know, a five-star is what we used to call it in high school, when you go up to someone and essentially high-five a part of their body as hard as you physically can. Sure, it hurt both the receiver and giver, but that's the kind of games we made to terrorize each other in the hallways. It was after the kitchen incident when the sleep paralysis started. I knew absolutely nothing about sleep paralysis at this point, so for months I had no idea what was happening to me in the middle of the night. I only really remember the first time it happened in detail, the rest just being pieces of fear and darkness. I fell asleep watching a movie, so there was some ambient light when I woke up. Waking up randomly at all hours of the night wasn't a new thing for me, but waking up without being able to move was terrifying. I remember hearing what I thought was an ATV outside my window, and this almost whisper-like sound from somewhere in my room. I kept trying to move something, my arm, my leg, even a finger at that point, but couldn't. My heart started beating harder, and it started to feel like someone was grabbing my throat, making it extremely hard to breathe. The room started dimming down, the light from the movie was being blocked almost, and then all of a sudden I was able to move. Obviously shut up in bed, and just like that, everything was normal. I had a hard time falling back asleep that night. I was 16 when the last figure appeared. I still saw the other two here and there, still refused to hang the cross back up in my room, and started to think I was just seeing things. Maybe I was stressed out about school and trying to have a social life. The last figure was probably my favorite of the three. My boyfriend and I nicknamed it Little One due to the feeling of playfulness and childlike curiosity I got from it. The first time Little One appeared was when I was playing Xbox with some friends. Something moved out of the corner of my eye, and I saw this little light gray figure sitting beside me. Typically, I would chalk it up as the light from the TV hitting my sheets weird, except, well, A, the lights in my room were all on, and the area wasn't dark enough for this to happen, and B, it was gone within a second. After the initial shock of it all, something about this one felt safe, non-threatening, almost like it was in the same position I was in, confused and afraid. I didn't see Little One for a few days until I went to shower one night. Right as I was turning on the light to the bathroom, I noticed a familiar gray shadow beside our laundry basket that disappeared when I saw it. It appeared again in my room that night, at the foot of my bed when I was getting ready for sleep. Same thing as last time, except it took a second to disappear. My boyfriend and I eventually started joking that as Little One got more comfortable with me, we began playing hide and seek. It would hide somewhere, waiting for me to come find it, then run off to the next area. I liked Little One. After a few months of seeing Little One and the white figure in my house, I decided to do some digging. Was our house moved onto an ancient burial ground? Was it haunted before my parents bought it? Was there a skeleton under our trailer? I asked my mom about it one night. Turns out, to my parents' knowledge, the land we moved on to was never a cemetery or burial ground. No one died in the house, even though the previous owner was a bit creepy. And my mom had moments where she could smell perfume in the house, a perfume that nobody owned when she was alone. They shut down the topic after they gave me these answers, telling me the more I think about it and dig, the more I would convince myself that something is going on in the house. They kept telling me the house wasn't haunted and it was time to lay off the horror movies. Which, I don't blame them. If I didn't experience this firsthand, I wouldn't believe myself either. After my parents shut me down, I began doing my own research. My boyfriend, now super intrigued by the adventure he'd been dragged into, happily joined in. The first big break was from one of his friends. Clairvoyance ran in his family, the ability to communicate with the dead and help the dying cross over via their dreams. I myself am not a clairvoyant, but the experiences and information he had gave me a better idea of what to look for in future research. From this, the third eye concept came around. The third eye is what connects the living with other realms, mostly the dead. My third eye was opening and allowing me to see glimpses into worlds I would never seen otherwise. It explained why I saw the figures, but not why they were in my house. I learned varying ways of spiritually protecting myself and cleansing the negativity that would attract the darker side of the other world. I also learned that if a mirror and a doorway are across from one another, that it also acts as a doorway for demons and other dark essences to travel with ease. My house had two. One located in the bathroom my brother and I had to share. From the door, all you see is the mirror mounted on the wall. It was terrifying to look at in the dark. The other was in my parents' bedroom. From their main doorway, you could see the mirror attached to their main dresser. This might be the cause of the figures. I didn't look much further into it. Knowing there was very little I could do to fix it, I decided to leave it as just another terrifying fact to be buried in the back of my mind. It was after the research when things got worse. The weird occurrences got more frequent. I remember coming home from my after-school job one night. It had to be like 9:30. It was the dead of winter, so it was pitch black. I was getting ready to leave my car and head in the house when the stereo suddenly started blasting static. I, to this day, have no honest idea what caused this, or why it only happened the one time. I began feeling watched, almost stalked at night. Like anytime the lights were off, there was something in the dark waiting for me. This made going to the washroom at night a terrible experience. I saw figures much more often. The white one sitting outside my parents' bedroom door, curled into herself like she was crying. She disappeared the moment she looked up at me. Watching the sunset that summer, I saw the black figure standing on top of a shed in our yard, contrasting the golden background. I still feel the fear deep in my gut when I think of this one. I remember watching it, trying to predict what it wanted to do next. It ran to the end of the roof, and probably towards me. It blended in with the darkness of the yard. I ran in the house and never looked back. I remember hearing whispers of my name, knocking on the walls, nightmares that felt so real I questioned if they actually happened. Everything nightmares and scary stories are made of happened to me in that house. Which is probably why I pushed myself so hard to get out as soon as I could. I moved in my second year of college for a couple of months. I was completing the hands-on setting under the eye of a mentor section of my schooling. I left town for a couple of months and lived in a cute little townhouse. My washer and dryer were in the basement, which was concrete walls and 2 light bulbs hanging from the ceiling. It was unsettling, but still felt safer than what was happening at home. Those couple of months were the best, uneventful months I could have asked for at the time. I moved back home after the mentorship, and while things did settle on the spiritual side, one thing was off. And it was my parents' closet, believe it or not. My mom decided on a mirror closet door, so 2 doors with mirrors top to bottom. Something about that mirror called out to me, like some unsung siren call. Our family cats preferred to sleep in the room, so my parents didn't mind if we snuck in during the day once in a while to love up on the cats or use it as a shortcut to our laundry room. While I tried avoiding it and the room, I was doing the exact opposite without realizing. I would somehow end up in the room petting the cats or walking through to grab my laundry more often than ever. I never actually found out why the mirror had that effect, and I make a point to avoid my parents' room whenever I go to visit now. I don't think there were any real events that happened in the year between moving home and my boyfriend, now husband, and I inheriting his grandfather's house. Besides the overwhelming sense of dread and fear that something was there, I felt a weight off my chest the first night I stayed in my house, like I wasn't being stalked by something in the shadows. Like I was finally free. It's going to be 3 years this Halloween since I moved out of my parents' house. 3 years since I saw the figures. It's been 3 whole years. But every time I visit, I feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up right as I enter the doorway. Like the unanswered questions are still ringing in my ears. Like the calls of the unknown are still waiting for my answer. My parents' house is haunted. This is how I know. Thank you for listening to that. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, this is, I guess, my second narration now. So let me know if there's anything that I should try to improve upon. And hopefully it was an enjoyable little story. Thank you again, Sam, for sending in that little submission. I say little. What was that? Like 40 pages? 3. That was 3 pages. Thank you, though. And if someone has a story that they would like to send in, be it fictional or be it a recount of something that has happened to you, which, to be honest, I personally prefer because I find them more interesting if it's based in reality and actual recounts of events. But feel free to send anything along to the cubictales email, and just make sure to sign it or somehow let me know how you would like to be credited. Thanks. Nobody died in the house. Don't put that in.